much yesterday. So last week I was in Vietnam, and one of the institutions I visited was the Vietnamese German University. So that's not TNE, it's a different undertaking. It was jointly founded by two governments, by the Vietnamese and the German government, but still it's interesting for our discussion. So I asked, what happened to your bachelor graduates? What happened to the young people? And it turns out about a third go into the labor market, mainly in Vietnam and in the region. 1/3, they enroll in master programs at that institution, so at the Vietnamese German University. 1/3 of the graduates go to Germany. And I was wondering a little bit why the approach of the UK versus France versus Germany versus a couple of other countries is so different. And one explanation is that UK is at the forefront and the rest of us are a little bit behind. But it might also be that we have slightly different priorities, and they are also linked to maybe the political climate in our countries. So the UK traditionally had a strong income source in international students. My understanding is that about a quarter of the students in the UK are international. And of course, the fee structure is different for international students. So why some of us might be sad that the UK has left the European Union, it also means that EU students need to pay the same fees as international students now. So this is attractive for the universities, and if this decision would be reversed in future, it would mean diminishing income to the university. So this is something to be considered. But to come back to the last point here on this slide, when Francisco mentioned multi-crisis yesterday, he mentioned a couple of points, but we didn't talk about demography yet. Of course, demography, that's a key challenge for many, many, many of our countries. And the countries try to innovate, and we have to see if they innovate faster than they get old, yes? And there is a need for qualified graduates. Our own countries do not produce enough qualified graduates. One of my two home countries, so to speak, Germany, is now turning towards skilled migrants from India. We discussed this a little bit yesterday. Quality of technical education in India is at many, many institutions excellent. So of course, these are the people you want to have, yes? And I think this is a very rational consideration for many European countries, but the political climate is not conducive in all of these countries. So income plays a role, skilled migration plays a role, and the role universities play in this. And this is also something which might be worth discussing more in the TNE context. Okay, so that's information which comes from Universities UK and the British Council, that TNE will overtake onshore international enrollments. Here it says by next year, but I think realistically it's by 2030. I see Louise nodding, so I assume that's right. Also, if you look at the BBC website, just 2 days ago, BBC reported actually on TNE and what UK universities are doing in India now. India was already mentioned by Cheryl this morning, so there is a national education policy which has explicit provision for transnational education, which I found very interesting. So it's a declared goal of the Indian government. And now BBC reports that UK universities are going to India. There's a picture of University Southampton on the website. In general, we can say, so we had the 2.5 growth for enrollment overall. We had the factor 3 growth for international students, both global figures. And then if we look at T&E, these are UK data, but for UK we see an increase of by factor 3.4 between the year 2025. And if we look at this 1 million target, it would be a factor 5.3 increase. So enrollment growing, international enrollment growing even more, T&E growing even more. Okay. So we talked about this before, but this is the past, right? If we look at how things developed up to this point, we have the top 5 host countries: China, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Egypt, Singapore. I put Greece there because I think in the European context, Greece is quite important. It's a little bit behind Singapore. Okay, top 5 home countries: UK, Australia, US, China, France. I highlighted China because it's the only country which appears in both lists. I think that's interesting. It tells us something about China, yes? And I think Cheryl could say much more about this. My own reading would be that it's a pragmatic country which is driven by, pragmatic considerations like income generation, spreading the word, soft power, maybe, but also by strong willingness to learn, yes? So there is a wish of having foreign providers in the country, but also to go out to generate income and to exercise what was described as soft power. Now, of course, we have the new players coming. I already mentioned Vietnam, which I think is a very appealing market. I already mentioned India, etc. So I think we will see a lot of action in the years to come. I go to the QA topic now. So global developments in quality assurance. A lot of things which we take for granted now, but the world looked very, very different 30 years ago. Continental Europe, where I come from, basically the ministries determining the curriculum. And if you prescribe in a very nitty-gritty way what should happen at universities, you don't need quality assurance, yes? It's more like people basically implement your orders, and then there aren't a lot of questions, yes? But that's not the world we live in. Universities become more and more autonomous, which can mean different things in different contexts. If you read the documents of the European University Association, they say there are 4 main dimensions of university autonomy. Okay, but in any case, universities become more autonomous, and you have a balance between autonomy and accountability. For Europe, item 2 on this list is key. I think this came out of one of the Bologna ministerial meetings, I think the one in my hometown, Berlin, where it was stated by the ministers that the main responsibility for quality assurance is with the universities. And that's super, super important, because otherwise we play games of hide and seek, and that's not the idea of QA. Okay, it has become more differentiated over the past 20 to 30 years in terms of institutional versus program accreditation, regional approaches, regional cooperation on quality assurance, regional documents which guide us. For Europe, this would be the ESG 2015, European Standards and Guidelines, but similar initiatives also driven by Inquire on the global level, ASEAN for Asia, etc., etc. International accreditation plays a particular role for regulated professions. We can discuss this more. There are special cases in terms of digital approaches, micro-credentials, joint and double degrees, TNE, etc. Okay, yesterday we heard from Dr. Romela from the Higher Education Council a little bit about the plans for Mauritius. And the idea is to move away, to some extent, from program accreditation towards institutional accreditation. And this is what we see in many countries. So in my own country, Germany, around 20 years ago, we suddenly discovered that after a lot of effort, which had gone into external QA, we still had 20,000 unaccredited programs, and it was not imaginable that we would manage to go through all these accreditations within a reasonable amount of time. And this was the hour of institutional accreditation. And it makes a lot of sense. It is also what we would see in industry, yes? Toyota wouldn't go to every supplier and check every detail of every car, but Toyota would accredit the Toyota quality assurance system at the supplier. I think we have an analogy there when it comes to higher education. Okay. So there are some specific features for quality assurance of TNE, which of course is driven by the modality. It's a program delivered across national borders. It's completely clear that this poses certain challenges. Also in the case which we discuss here in Mauritius, not only across national borders, but also across regions actually, which might have a different approach to quality assurance, yes? I really liked, I have to say this, what we heard yesterday, that many of the considerations are genuinely pragmatic, yes? So Dr. Romela said yesterday, yeah, we noticed some of the universities, they have like our national approach to credit hours, but others, they have ECTS because they work a lot with the European universities. So we came up with a conversion. It's a little bit like, okay, here's local currency, here's a euro, here's a dollar, that's your conversion rate. I think ECTS purists might be upset about this, and yeah, but this is teaching hours and that's workload, etc. But many of us who have worked in this field for many years know that's not really how it works in practice. So I have to say, I personally, I really like this, to have practical approaches to a couple of these things. Ensuring the quality of TNE, of course, is extremely important for students, also for the wider public, etc. But students need to know what this degree is about, yes? And also questions of recognition come in, and I will come back to this in a moment. Important is also here, then you have quite a long list of actors. It's already quite complex for quality assurance in general, if you are only operating in one country. Now, if you operate across borders, of course, you have at least 2 different reference systems, maybe more, where you have prominent regional players, as is the case in Europe. So here we have home university, host country QA, maybe a regional framework, Inquire, UNESCO coming in with provisions on recognition, etc., and of course, local delivery. Okay, good. So I try to do one thing, looking a little bit at the countries also which are represented here at our event. I thought, is there a kind of typology of QA for TNE? Yes? And I would say yes, and I see 3 broad, let's say, schools. Yeah? Maybe we start with Malaysia. Yes, Malaysia it's very clear Malaysia wants to have control over what is delivered in the country. Yes? So this means there needs to be an accreditation in Malaysia. Yeah? And it also means that if we look at the regulatory burden, it is higher than in other cases, because it means that you need the accreditation in your home country, you also need the full accreditation in Malaysia. Then a very different case is Dubai, and we heard about it yesterday. Aha, please. Yes, Subhendra, come in.
No is not the right answer. Now we need local accreditation.
Yes, okay. I was going to say this because we discussed yesterday. Yeah. So, Dubai used to be no for the institutions usually operating in the free zone. That was my reading initially. Okay, they need home country accreditation, etc., etc. And it looked a little bit low maintenance, but I also understood from reading about it, I haven't been, and we just discussed yesterday, from reading about it, I understood that there are problems with recognition. So we can imagine it, in the old days, providers would come, they set up their things in the free zone, very good, low barriers to entry, which is nice in a way. But then graduates could not apply for government jobs, for example, and that's a problem. Not maybe because, maybe just a tiny minority of your students want to go for government jobs, but it has a certain signaling function. It doesn't look good to me if I already know that more graduates cannot apply for certain jobs. It's not unheard of. We had the same situation in Poland 20 years ago when they introduced the bachelor, but the graduates couldn't apply for government jobs. That's not good. Okay, but Subhendra educated me yesterday and told me, yes, Nina, but that's the past and things have changed. And I understand that there are two main players. One is KHDA. We also have a speaker from KHDA this afternoon, so we will hear more about this. And there is a government itself, and in your case, you got accreditation from the government, so this issue, in a way, is resolved for you. So this is work in progress. I go on for now, but I would really like you to comment on this once I close. So, coming to Mauritius, this seems to be, as I already said, a pragmatic approach, a little bit the middle way. The way I understand it is that the providers, they are accredited in their home country, and here it says usually yes under local accreditation, but my understanding was that the authorities check that indeed the program is accredited in their home country, but then there is a lighter approach as compared to Malaysia. I see Dr. Nashmi nodding, so I hope I get this right. Regulatory burden, I classified this as medium, a kind of dual approach, but compared to Malaysia, a bit a lighter approach, which I liked. Which brings me to the good practice. Okay. First point here is not very well expressed. It says equivalence of standards, but equivalence, it's an odd word, because in a way, we don't deliver the same thing. We never do, yes? What this is about, really, when we talk about standards, it's about meeting learning outcomes. And learning outcomes, they are, in practice, on a continuum, but for this purpose, there is a threshold, yes? It's like being a parent. You might know the concept of the good enough parent. I like this. I'm not a perfect parent, I'm just a good enough parent. Same with learning outcomes. The students don't need to be super brilliant, they need to meet the learning outcomes, and this is what is meant. I think that's important because in many countries which I visit, the term standards is used in a very, very excessive way. And often when you ask, okay, so what do you mean by standards? The answer is not very clear. So this is why I felt it was good to clarify this. I also think it's a good practice to have a kind of joint oversight while avoiding duplications. And this is why I like overall the approach as it is here. I'm curious to see where this is going in terms of institutional accreditation, etc. We need clear information for students, no question. Also in terms of recognition of the degree, stakeholder involvement, that's clear, and contextual adaptation. Okay, so initially I wanted to say something like T&E is about growing partnerships and QA as well. But of course QA, it's a different animal, yes? So the regulators play a certain role, and the way we grow together on QA is different from T&E, but what I'm saying here is that it also requires good partnerships and trust. And this is what we will discuss further today, including at this very interesting session after lunch, where we will hear different country perspectives. I would leave it like this. If there is time, I didn't check, maybe not. We could please come in. I know that you, Dr. Subhendra, you already raised your hand, and maybe if you could shed a bit more light on the situation in Dubai and how it has changed very recently, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nina, and fantastic presentation, enjoyed it. But a couple of points.
Yeah, please.
Dubai as a emirate and UAE as a federal government, they have different strategic objectives, and then therefore Dubai invited us, for example, and several universities like Middlesex and others were invited, and then they left it to them. So whatever the branch campuses did, they were allowed to do because the understanding was that they came from reputed universities back home, and then too much of oversight is not needed. However, UAE has its own strategic goals, and then therefore, and then recently, in 2025, the UAE government, the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, and the KHDA entered into an agreement where it became mandatory for any university branch campus operating in Dubai to obtain the ministry license and accreditation. So it's now mandatory. It's not optional. It's not that my degree is sort of not approved by the ministry, and then therefore the option is available. No, that's no more the case. In Dubai, you want to establish a branch campus, you have to get accreditation from the home campus. And a couple of other nuances. One is that, like I've been hearing about Mauritius, the regulations since yesterday, if I understand correctly, that is the same model that is followed there. If the home campus has the program that the branch campus offers in Dubai, and the accrediting body, which is the Commission for Academic Accreditation of the Ministry, goes easy on them. So the burden is not too much. You are running the same program as your home campus, and we know your home campus, Manipal. We are fine with it, we'll accredit. So all our programs got accredited very, very quickly. There is some amount of there is some amount of oversight. The commissioners go through your curriculum, suggest some changes, but overall we faced minimal problems. There is also another model, I don't know whether Mauritius is contemplating this, that we are allowed to, as a branch campus, offer a program which is not offered in the home campus. Okay, because the local requirement is there for such a program, and the home campus doesn't run a program, and I would like to run this program. So I take special permission from the home campus because the degree has to come from there. And there is a little more oversight on those programs. These, we call them as endorsed programs. A little more oversight because the home campus is now permitted, but the Commission for Accreditation checks it thoroughly whether, because this is not already running in the home campus, they're a little more careful about accrediting those programs. They take a longer period of time to do that. So that is one nuance. I don't know whether Mauritius plans to have such programs which are not run in the home campus. Yeah. So these are my 2 pennies worth. Thank you.
Super, thanks so much, Dr. Subhendra. Any other comments? Yes, we have Dr. Nashmi and then Marie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nushmi from the Higher Education Commission from Mauritius. Just to comment on Dr. Nina's presentation, first of all, thank you for the presentation, Dr. Nina. So for the accreditation of TNE programs, so basically last year, the government of Mauritius amended the Higher Education Act. So the Higher Education Commission is governed by the Higher Education Act. In August 2025 last year, it was amended to cater for exemption of accreditations for programs being awarded by foreign universities, international universities. So basically, if the program being offered in Mauritius has not been amended, has not been contextualized by more than 25%, so these programs are exempted from accreditation. So we have our internal processes. So last year we did sign the HEC and the QAA in the UK. We had an agreement, and also with the regulatory body in France. We have Sophie here from France, and then we have these 2 agreements. So whenever we do have such programs, we internally do have a contact with these regulatory bodies to ensure that these programs being offered for the time being, we have for the UK and France. So we ensure that these programs are being offered there. They've undergone quality assurance processes at the university. So these programs are being exempted. Middlesex has gone through this process. So this is one point. The second point, to answer our colleagues from Manipal, yes, we do have programs which are not being offered in the home country, but these programs have to undergo the complete accreditation process, because there is no question of being amended by there is no contextualization, because these programs have not been offered there in the home country. So in that case, we do have programs being offered in the being awarded there and offered locally. So they need to go through the whole accreditation process. And we are also in negotiation with Malaysia, Australia, South Africa, India, to go to have such agreements, so that other awarding bodies, we have a number of TNE programs here in Mauritius being offered locally from Malaysia, South Africa, so they also will have the possibility of not to go through that whole accreditation process. Thank you.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. So I'm playing with something at the back of my mind, and I'm just going to put it out there, and I would love to hear your comments, because when we look at transnational education, from both the presentations today, it's a matter of exporting knowledge or exposing students to an international curriculum, and then the question is about to what extent do you adopt it to meet the local context. But I think as transnational education matures and as branch campuses matures, there's a shift from transporting to co-development, so that you bring in an element of a global infrastructure or a global community. In our case, we participate in curriculum development, and so does Dubai. And in some instances, Dubai would lead on certain programs. In other cases, we would lead on certain programs. And it then becomes global knowledge sharing so that you don't have to contextualize it. So let's say we look at a case study. It would not be a case study that is UK specific, but something everyone can relate to. And then there's a culture of inclusivity around that to say it's a facilitation of learning rather than a one person standing in front dictating what it is, because you have a very global audience, and so there's different perspectives, and that enrich the learning process. And I think that would actually be interesting if we start looking at that sort of system approach as TNE matures, instead of exporting to a point where you become global and truly global.
I like what you just described. Now, all of you, as I said, you are the practitioners. You are at the forefront of this development. And, well, maybe I should just speak for myself. We are running a little bit behind, observing what's going on. And presenting, I already know, as I said, with the country list, that this is a past, and we will come back in 1 or 2 years, and it might look quite different, actually. Now, as I said, what you described sounds really, really nice, this co-creation thing where you remove it a little bit from a very detailed country context. For me, the important question is, what happens to the graduate? If the graduate really becomes, if they really become global players, I feel that's the best approach. If they are not, if the idea is that we support a labor market in a given country, then of course it would be good to have a big chunk of the reality of this country coming into our curriculum and helps the student to prepare for this future labor market. And I think this is really a tricky point in a way, because we want to support countries on their way. We want a real partnership. We also want good graduate students in our home institutions, yes? It's also, it doesn't need to be the army moving in, to put it like this. It is also simply how academia works, yes? That we identify capable students and we want to give them opportunities. So these are two different perspectives, I feel, and I think we could discuss this much more, yeah.
There is one element that I've not really seen in all the conversations we had since yesterday, is that TNE becomes important also in our global south, because our universities, mainly the public ones, may not necessarily be able to deliver everything. There are some areas where we do not have necessarily the expertise locally. You know, if we take the emerging ones, we take, for example, fintech, right? We take even AI. We do not necessarily have all the expertise locally to service those programs. And if we are in a university, I think it's not just going through textbooks and using textbooks to teach, right? So there is that element of also embedding into your teaching, your research. So I think this aspect of responding to the local demand where the local cannot service is important.
I really like this point, and I see that I'm generating more and more ideas for future events which we are doing here. So you see, I really want to come back. So you are at a very interesting point in time in Mauritius, where you basically You have a new higher education strategy. You are embarking on the development of a new higher education law. You make changes to your quality assurance system, and a couple of other things are coming together. You are in a particular situation because, in a way, okay, we have the lists of the countries and they go by number of students, so that's not relevant to you because you have a population of roughly 1 million, so you don't appear in the list. But it would be totally different if we would have a list showing the percentage of T&E in the overall higher education system. In your case, this is more than 25%. I think T&E, these are 27% of your students. So this is a really important part of your higher education system. The way we discuss here, it's a little bit, well, you contribute, the providers contribute, so we have a cross-border discussion, so to speak, which is nice. It will also be great to discuss many of these things very much from a Mauritius perspective and to say, this is our higher education system. This is where we plan to go. This is where T&E comes in. I mean, you make this point regarding certain subjects. And I have to say, for me, it was really interesting to read about it and also to confront my own preconceived ideas a little bit. So my assumption was that these would be mainly low-cost subjects, yes? So very much like humanities, law, etc., etc. And then I had a look and I saw that there's health programs and there is engineering, which of course is usually like a factor 5 compared to humanities and social science in terms of the costs. So this is very different. And what I would like to know more about is really the local labor market. To what extent do we support the local labor market, yes? How many entrepreneurs do these programs generate? Do they stay here, yes? Do they make the country overall more innovative? Maybe that's asking a lot. Yes. We are often not delivering on these points in our own countries sufficiently. But this would be the goal, no? So that's a different perspective. And I would like this very much. If you do an event on this, you invite me, I will come. Yes, please, Fabrice.
Thank you very much, Nina. I really enjoyed your presentation and your points. There's a comment, as well as possible a question, but more of a comment that will help us framing our conversation in the afternoon, where we'll be looking at quality assurance. Because what you mentioned, by emphasizing the importance of learning outcomes, goes straight to what I see as the main challenge in quality assuring T&E, and also in recognizing T&E qualifications. And I explain, because usually the golden rule, basic principle for quality assuring T&E is that the quality of transnational education should remain equivalent or comparable to similar provision offered back home. And everyone agrees about that, but then when you start asking, what is it that needs to be comparable, then you got different views. This is where challenges start, because on the one hand, you got learning outcomes, and everyone tends to agree that learning outcomes should remain the same. A graduate from a T&E program should have the same set of basic or threshold competencies and skills of a graduate coming out of a similar program back home. Other different stakeholders in different countries tend to see that learning inputs should also be comparable. That is, the learning experience or the duration of a master, teachers involved in teaching the programs. And when you start to add these learning inputs in the comparability equation, you end up with recognition challenges, because online learning is intrinsically very different in the way in which students are taught, but also branch campuses, collaborative partnerships. So this is where international dialogue between regulators is very important, so that we get a shared understanding about about what should remain comparable. And I was wondering whether, in your experience, these dialogues are also being present in international fora. What is your view about that? But I will pick this issue up again later this afternoon.
Yeah, not much to add to this. I happened to be in the kitchen when the European qualification framework was discussed, and we started from higher education, and this was not an easy process. And UK and Ireland were very prominently represented in these fora. In general, the Bologna process and the EU owes a lot to the Brits. We tend to forget this, but that's really the reality. And basically, the Bologna process got ECTS from continental Europe, but it got the learning outcomes concept from the UK and Ireland, because at the time Scotland already had a qualification framework, Ireland had a qualification framework, and these nice people explained to us what this is really about. And I think this was liberating, because we always hear all this stuff about standards, and it's like the golden shrine, and people go and worship it. And you never know what this is really about. And to have somebody come and say, okay, this is what we expect a bachelor to know and be able to do, and that's it. And you can be better, but this is really what we should go for. I found this extremely liberating. And to bring us back to Mauritius, I see the same here. Learning outcomes concept very much present, and then this pragmatic approach to credits. As I said, I really like this pragmatic approach. So just a yes. Yeah. Okay. I like this. You see, I moved down because I found it a little bit artificial to stand over here, and we are a little bit a family size format here anyway. But I think time is up. I really enjoyed this. Thanks a lot for leaning in and giving me the opportunity. And I look forward to the further discussions. We now have a presentation by one of our practitioners, by Louise. And then in the afternoon, we have this panel on QA, where we also get the Malaysia perspective, and again, speakers from Dubai, etc. So this will be great. Thanks a lot.